Hello and welcome to grammar class. Today's topic is inversion in English grammar. You see, the word inversion means reversal or changing something into its opposite. But to begin with, as you know, the normal order of words in an English sentence is subject plus verb plus other words. In other words, normally the verb comes after the subject in a sentence. But in certain situations or certain types of sentences, we put the verb before the subject. This is what inversion means. So remember, in English grammar, inversion is the process of reversing the normal order or interchanging the positions of the subject and the verb in a sentence. In short, inversion simply means placing the verb before the subject in a sentence in certain situations or to serve certain purposes. For example, in the assertive sentence, he is a doctor, the subject he comes first, followed by the verb is. However, in the next sentence, the verb is placed before the subject he to ask a question or to form the interrogative structure. In this interrogative sentence, the subject he and the verb is are inverted to ask a question. Now let's study the different uses of inversion in English. First up, the subject and auxiliary verb or the subject and the principal verb inversion in interrogative sentences. You see, in interrogative sentences, the subject and the auxiliary verb are inverted to ask a question. You see, in the statement, he is playing cricket, the auxiliary verb is has come after the subject he. This is the normal word order. However, in the interrogative sentence, the auxiliary verb is placed before the subject he. Is he playing cricket? In the next sentence, they speak English, the verb speak has come after the subject they, but it has no auxiliary verb. In simple present tense, no auxiliary verb is used before the main verb in affirmative sentences. So in interrogative sentences, we have to invert the subject with do or does. Do they speak English? In the next example, the verb took is in the simple past tense without any auxiliary verb before it. Now remember, in an interrogative sentence of simple past tense, the subject is inverted with the auxiliary verb did. So here we are putting the auxiliary verb did before the subject he to ask a question. This is an example of inversion. Here are some more examples of inversion in interrogative sentences on your screen. The assertive sentence, it has been raining since midnight, has two auxiliary verbs, has and been in present perfect continuous tense. But remember, in the interrogative structure, only the first auxiliary verb has will be placed before the subject it. In the next example, where are you going? The auxiliary are has come before the subject you. In the interrogative sentence, how did he die? The auxiliary did and the subject he are inverted. In the following sentence, may I come in? The modal auxiliary may and the subject I have been inverted. Here the term inverted means their positions have been interchanged. But look, the next sentence, who are you, is slightly different. You see, in this sentence, the subject you has been inverted with the principal or copular verb are because there is no auxiliary verb here. Similarly, in the next sentence, is he your best friend also, the subject he has been inverted with the principal or linking verb is in the absence of any auxiliary verb. In this way, we learn that in interrogative sentences, the subject may be inverted with the auxiliary verb or the principal verb. However, it is interesting to note that if there is an indirect question in the subordinate clause, there is no subject-verb inversion in that. Now see, in the first example here, the subordinate clause, where he lives, is an indirect question. Why? Because it has come after the main clause, do you know? In such indirect interrogative structures, the verb comes after the subject. So the inversion of does and he in this indirect question, do you know where does he live, is grammatically incorrect. The sentence, please tell us who you are, is also an indirect question. And so there is no inversion here and the verb are has come after the subject you. Please tell us who are you is grammatically incorrect because of the inversion in the subordinate clause. Are you aware how he had survived the air crash is also an indirect question. Naturally, the auxiliary verb has come after the subject he, and there is no inversion here. In the next example, the auxiliary is has come after the subject train because this is also an indirect question. We learn that an indirect question is a polite way of asking something, and it comes after the main clause in the sentence and has no subject-verb inversion. The subject-verb inversion is also used in exclamatory sentences. For example, in the exclamatory sentence, "How beautiful are these flowers?" the verb "are" has come before the subject, "these flowers." As you know, exclamatory sentences express strong and sudden feelings or emotions of the mind. So, though not necessary, the subject-verb inversion does full justice to our exclamation. And then in the well-known Shakespearean quote, "What a piece of work is a man," the verb is has come before the subject man. In exclamatory sentences beginning with there and here, denoting excitement or wonder, the verb comes before the subject. For example, in the exclamatory sentence, "There goes the bell," the verb goes and the subject, the bell, have been inverted. In the sentence, "Here comes the queen," there is inversion of the verb comes and the subject, the queen. In optative sentences also, denoting prayer, wish, etc., the modal auxiliary may is inverted with the subject. "May you live long" is an example of such inversion. The subject auxiliary or the subject-verb inversion also happens in conditional sentences. We know that in conditional sentences, the subordinate clause begins with the conjunction if. It expresses a condition. Now, in this if clause or conditional clause of conditional sentences, when the subject-verb inversion is used, the conjunction if is removed. In other words, we remove the conjunction if from the if clause and use the subject-verb inversion in that clause, while the other clause remains as it is. The modal auxiliary should is used for inversion in the first conditional sentence. The subjunctive verb were is used for inversion in the second conditional sentence. And in the third conditional sentence, the auxiliary verb of past perfect tense had is used for inversion with the subject. In the first example, "If it rains heavily, the match will be cancelled" is a first conditional sentence. In this sentence, the conditional clause "if it rains heavily" has a simple present tense verb rains. Here we are removing the conjunction if and inverting the subject it with the modal auxiliary should. So we have the inverted sentence, "Should it rain heavily, the match will be cancelled." "If I were you, I would speak the truth" is an example of the second conditional sentence. Here too, the conjunction if is removed and the verb were in subjunctive mood is placed before the subject I. So the inverted sentence is, "Were I you, I would speak the truth." In the third example, we have a third conditional sentence. "If the doctor had come in time, he would not have died." In this sentence also, the subject of the conditional clause, the doctor, may be inverted with the auxiliary verb had to remove the conjunction if. Had the doctor come in time, he would not have died. In literary and formal English, we use the quotative inversion in direct narration. The quotative inversion involves the inversion of the reporting subject and the reporting verb. "I have no parents, no home," said the poor boy. The reporting verb said has been placed before the reporting subject, the poor boy, in this sentence. In the next example of the direct narration, "Call me whenever you are scared," said the angel to the little girl. The reporting verb said has come before the reporting subject, the angel. We know that emphatic sentences often begin with specific expressions including negative and restrictive adverbials such as hardly, scarcely, no sooner, little, never, seldom, not often, not until, not for a moment, only if, only when, only after, under no circumstances, by no means, etc. Emphatic sentences may also start with certain adverbs like here, there, away, later, etc. In such sentences, the subject auxiliary or the subject-verb inversion is used for emphasis. Now see some examples of inversion in emphatic sentences on your screen. In the first example, the sentence begins with the adverb hardly, while the subject, the doctor, and the auxiliary had are inverted. The inversion of the adverb hardly and the auxiliary verb had before the subject, the doctor, makes the sentence emphatic. In the second example, the adverbial expression no sooner and the auxiliary verb did are inverted with the subject I for emphasis. Little did I know that he would betray me. In this sentence also, the adverb little and the auxiliary verb did are inverted with the subject I for emphasis. In the fourth example, the adverb never and the auxiliary verb have come before the subject I for emphasis. If you say, I have never seen such a beautiful garden, this sentence is not so emphatic as the inverted sentence, never have I seen such a beautiful garden. In the next example also, the adverb never and the auxiliary verb will are coming before the subject people to add emphasis to the statement. And then when a sentence starts with the expression not only, the subject and the verb are inverted in the same clause for emphasis. If the negative adverbial under no circumstances comes at the beginning of a sentence, the subject and the verb are inverted for emphasis. Under no circumstances can he travel in the ladies' compartment is a forceful statement. As you can see, there is inversion of can and he in this sentence. We often start a sentence with so plus adjective or adverb to lay emphasis on a certain quality or attribute. In such a sentence, we use the subject-verb inversion. So honest was he that we all trusted him. You can see that the verb was is placed before the subject he in this sentence. Sometimes the subject-verb inversion occurs in the second part or the main clause of the emphatic sentence. In emphatic sentences, starting with certain expressions like only if, only when, not until, only after, etc., the inversion takes place in the second part or main clause of the sentence. For example, in the sentence, only if he works hard will he succeed, the subject-verb inversion will he takes place in the second part or main clause of the sentence. In the sentence, not until he is punished will he change his habit, the subject-verb inversion will he takes place in the second part or clause of the sentence. Remember, the subject-verb inversion usually takes place in the subordinate clause of the sentence. However, in these exceptional sentences, it's taking place in the second or main clause of the sentence. The last example on your screen begins with the restrictive adverbial only after, but in the same clause there is no subject-verb inversion. Here, the subject-verb inversion were the boys takes place in the second part or the main clause of the sentence. Like I said earlier, the subject-verb inversion also occurs in sentences starting with certain adverbials of place. For example, in the sentence, there lived a wise saint in the forest, there is an adverb of place, and the verb lived has come before the subject a wise saint. I opened the door, and there stood a smiling salesman. In this sentence also, the principal verb stood and the subject, a smiling salesman, are inverted. And then the sentence, away went the train like a bullet, also uses the subject-verb inversion. The principal verb went is put before the subject, the train. The sentence, here are the keys, also has the subject-verb inversion. It begins with the adverb of place here, while the subject, the keys, and the verb are inverted. When sentences begin with adverb phrases like under the tree, in a dark corner, out of the hole, the subject-verb inversion is used for emphasis. Interestingly, in the sentence, under the tree was sitting an old man, both the auxiliary was and the main verb sitting have been inverted with the subject, an old man. So it is possible to invert the subject with more than one verb in certain cases. In the next example, the main verb stood comes before the subject, two little boys, and in the last, the main verb emerged is placed before the subject, a cobra. Remember, in these emphatic sentences, the subject-verb inversion is used to emphasize the subject after the verb. Last but not the least, the subject-auxiliary inversion is also used in elliptical sentences. What is an elliptical sentence? Well, an elliptical sentence is one in which a word or phrase is eliminated or omitted to avoid its repetition. For example, my brother likes chocolates and so do I. In the second clause of this sentence, the verb likes is omitted to avoid its repetition, and therefore the auxiliary do is inverted with the subject I. He did not go to school yesterday and neither did I. In this sentence also, the auxiliary verb did and the subject I are inverted to avoid the repetition of the verb go. Joe is scared of dogs and so are you. In the second clause of this sentence, the adjective scared is left out and the linking verb are is inverted with the subject you in its place. That's the end of today's class. Hopefully you liked the video. Please be sure to like, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more grammar videos. Thanks for watching.